Hello, I'm Charlotte. Up until my 32nd birthday, the peak of my excitement was my employer's decision to transition from using PCs to Macs at the accounting firm where I worked. Not exactly the stuff of thrilling news headlines. However, everything shifted during a friend's birthday celebration. On that particular evening, I found myself standing awkwardly at the edge of a crowded living room, gripping a soda while squeezed into a dress that felt a bit too snug. The music was blaring, far too loud for any meaningful conversation, yet it seemed perfectly suited for him. Andrew. He towered over most, which probably helped him notice me from across the room. He approached with a kind of assurance that caused my heart to flutter. "You're Charlotte, right?" he asked, his voice surprisingly clear above the booming bass. Yeah. And you are?" I managed, taking a sip of my drink to appear more relaxed than I actually was. "Andrew, I've seen you around. Do you mind if I join you?" He didn't wait for my reply. Instead, he simply assumed acceptance and positioned himself beside me. "Not at all," I responded, nearly drowned out by the latest chart-topping track blaring through the speakers. "So, Charlotte, what brings you here tonight?" he inquired, leaning in. His demeanor was laid back, but his gaze was piercing. "Just here to celebrate Kelly's birthday. Do you know her well?" "Yeah, we went to college together. She keeps pulling me into these parties." He shrugged, a playful smile on his lips. "Hard to say no, right?" We laughed together, and it felt spontaneously easy. "I get it. I work with her. It's tough to decline," I said. "An accountant, right?" He nodded as if he'd known all along. "That's right. Numbers are my thing," I quipped, though there was typically nothing humorous about spreadsheets to me. "Sounds exhilarating," he said with a grin, and I couldn't quite tell if he was teasing. "Oh, absolutely. It's all wild parties and high stakes in the accounting realm," I joked. Our laughter merged again, and in that moment, I felt an ease in conversing with someone who seemed genuinely intrigued by what I had to say. It was exhilarating and slightly intimidating. "Do you want to step outside for some fresh air?" he suggested, nodding toward the backyard. Gratefully, I agreed, eager to escape the cacophony. Outside, the cool air was a welcome relief. "So what brings a guy like you to a place like this?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation flowing as smoothly as he had. "Just looking for a good time, I suppose, and maybe someone interesting to hang out with," he replied, his smile reaching his eyes and causing them to crinkle at the corners. As we talked about various topics, movies we liked, books, his passion for graphic design, but feeling stuck in a corporate job, it felt like we had known each other for ages. As the evening drew to a close, he took out his phone. "Can I get your number? I'd like to see you again, Charlotte." I hesitated, unaccustomed to this sort of attention, but there was something genuine about him that felt reassuring. "Sure," I said, entering my number into his phone. His entire face lit up with a smile. "Great. I'll call you. We should go out, just the two of us." "Sounds good," I replied, my stomach flipping with nerves. I watched him leave, part of me still unable to believe this was now my life. Maybe turning 32 wasn't so bad after all. Perhaps it was the beginning of something truly wonderful. The days leading up to Andrew's call were a haze of anticipation. Before I knew it, the night of our first date had arrived. I was a bundle of nerves, not exactly seasoned in the dating scene. Opting for a simple blue dress, nothing extravagant, I hoped it would make the right impression. Andrew arrived at 6 sharp, driving a clean, well-maintained sedan that was understated yet fitting for him. As I climbed into the car, he greeted me with a dazzling smile. "You look great, Charlotte." "Thanks," I mumbled, my cheeks likely as red as a beet. "You look nice, too." He had chosen a quaint Italian restaurant for dinner. The aroma was inviting, though my stomach was too jittery to appreciate it. We ordered pasta, his with an elaborate sauce, mine with just marinara. "So, Charlotte, tell me something about yourself that no one else knows," he asked, twirling his meatball bake with practiced ease. Chuckling nervously, I played with my food more than I ate it. Well, I'm pretty uneventful, but I guess not everyone knows I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. He looked impressed. Really? That's pretty cool. You'll have to show me sometime. Sure, I said, beginning to feel a bit more at ease. What about you? Any hidden talents? I make a mean breakfast tacos, he boasted, his grin infectious. Best you'll ever have. I'll take your word for it. Maybe you can prove it sometime, I teased. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was exactly where I needed to be. The next few weeks were a blur of excitement. We spent as much time together as possible. Andrew would drop by after work, or I'd meet him for lunch near his office. He showed me his favorite places around the city, secret spots I'd never noticed before. It was like rediscovering the city for the first time. Things progressed quickly, and soon he invited me to meet his parents, Tyler and Doris. They lived in a small, welcoming home brimming with photos and mementos. Doris embraced me warmly the moment we stepped inside. "Oh, we've heard so much about you, dear," she exclaimed, squeezing my shoulders. "Thanks, Mom," Andrew chimed in, clearly happy with how things were unfolding. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation never lagged. "So, Charlotte, Andrew tells us you're an accountant. That must be interesting," Tyler remarked as he passed me the potatoes. "It has its moments," I replied with a smile. "Mostly just numbers and a lot of spreadsheets." I enjoyed the structure and certainty in my life, a comforting detail that wasn't lost on Andrew's mother, Doris, who showed genuine interest in learning more about me. "How's your family?" she inquired during one of our dinners together. "They're good, thanks. My dad's a businessman, always bustling with activity, but he's been a huge support throughout my life," I responded, appreciating her warmth. Life was moving rapidly, yet it all seemed perfectly aligned. The moments with Andrew felt significant, as if every event in my life had subtly led me to meet him. For once, I was recognized not merely as the plain Jane accountant, but for the unique person I was. Several months into our whirlwind romance, during an evening stroll by the river, the city lights twinkling off the water like a scene from a romantic film, Andrew stopped and turned to face me. "Charlotte, I've been thinking," he began, his voice serious. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing with anticipation. "I don't want to wait any longer. I know it's quick, but will you marry me?" In that instant, the world seemed to pause. No hesitation, no doubts, just a heartfelt, "Yes, Andrew, I'll marry you." The whirlwind didn't cease with the proposal. Soon after, I introduced Andrew to my father, who instantly admired Andrew's candid nature and clear affection for me. "He's a good man, Charlotte," Dad commented, offering his blessing, which meant everything to me. Our wedding was simple yet perfect. Nothing too lavish, but incredibly special. I found myself unexpectedly adoring how I looked in my wedding gown, a joy I shared by posting photos on social media to celebrate with friends and family. Post-wedding life was bustling. As we unpacked another box of wedding gifts in our cozy apartment, Andrew brought up a significant suggestion. "Hey, Charlotte, I've been thinking, how about we move in with my folks?" I paused, a coffee mug in hand. "Live with your parents?" I asked, unsure. He nodded earnestly. "Yeah, they're not getting any younger, and I'd feel better if we were around to help. Plus, it could save us some money on rent." It made sense, albeit moving in with the in-laws seemed like something straight out of a sitcom. "Are you sure they'd want us there all the time?" I questioned. "Absolutely," he assured me, his tone confident. "Mom's been hinting about it ever since we got engaged. Come on, it'll be good." So, a week later, there we were, arriving at his parents' house, our lives packed into numerous boxes. Andrew's mom, Doris, was already waving from the porch as we pulled up. "Oh, Charlotte, we're so thrilled to have you both here," she exclaimed, enveloping me in an overly enthusiastic hug. Tyler, Andrew's father, clapped him on the back. "Welcome home, son, and you too, Charlotte." The house was quaint, filled with furniture that seemed to have been frozen. Despite the overwhelming change, I kept a smile, ready to embrace this new chapter. I already missed our cozy little apartment as we moved our things into Andrew's parents' house. Andrew noticed my reluctance. "It's going to be great, you'll see," he reassured me softly as we lugged boxes inside. The initial days were a challenge. Doris was ever present, frequently popping into our room under the guise of checking if we needed anything. "Just making sure you're comfortable," she'd chirp as I tried to mask my discomfort over the lack of privacy. One evening, as we all sat down to dinner, Andrew, me, Tyler, and Doris, the conversation stumbled through trivial matters until Andrew nonchalantly dropped another bombshell. "So, the house needs some major repairs," he announced mid-bite of his meatloaf. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. "Repairs?" I coughed out. "Yeah, the roof's a disaster and the plumbing might as well belong to the Dark Ages," he explained. Tyler nodded in solemn agreement. "We were thinking," Andrew continued, his eyes dodging mine, "that maybe we could all chip in for the costs." I glanced at Doris, who seemed suddenly fascinated by her plate. "All of us?" I echoed. "Well, I just got this pay cut at work," Andrew mumbled, "so I'm a bit strapped at the moment." There it was, a knot formed in my stomach. "I'll see what I can do," I managed, though I had much more on my mind. Doris's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, Charlotte, that would be so helpful. You're such an angel," she exclaimed. The following weeks passed in a whirl of contractors and costly repairs. I wrote checks and forced smiles as Doris raved about how the house was transforming, while Tyler patted my back saying, "You're part of the family now, Charlotte." Part of the family, indeed, the part that foots the bill. One exhausting day after a series of pricey decisions, I collapsed onto our bed. Andrew sat beside me, his voice carrying a hint of genuine appreciation. "Thanks for handling all this, Charlotte." "It's fine," I lied, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, wondering about the financial toll. "I just didn't realize it would be this much." He squeezed my hand. "It'll all be worth it. This is for our future, right?" "Our future," I echoed, feeling uncertain about whose future we were building. As I lay there, listening to Andrew's steady breathing, I questioned whether moving in had been the right decision. But it was too late to turn back now. I was in too deep and I had to see it through, whatever the cost. After the renovations, the house indeed looked impressive, like something out of a home decor magazine. Despite the financial strain, I felt a flicker of pride as we hosted a small dinner party to celebrate, the four of us enjoying the renewed space. However, the atmosphere shifted mid-dinner. Doris grew silent, her demeanor heavy. She exchanged looks with Tyler and then turned to us, her eyes brimming with tears. "We need to tell you both something important," she said, her voice trembling. Andrew and I exchanged worried glances. "What's going on?" I asked, my stomach tightening. Tyler inhaled deeply. "The house. It's heavily mortgaged. We owe $480,000 and the bank could take it away if we don't settle the debt in 3 months. My fork clattered to the plate. "What do you mean? All the repairs we just paid for?" My voice trailed off. Doris began to sob. "We were ashamed and we thought we could manage it, but after the repairs and everything, there's just no way. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. All the money, all the effort, it was for a house that wasn't even secure. So what are you saying now?" My voice was sharper than I intended, echoing the shock and betrayal that flooded through me. More troubled than I intended, I faced Andrew as he avoided my gaze. "Well, I was hoping, Charlotte, you could talk to your dad." He began hesitantly. "Are you serious?" I snapped, my voice rising with incredulity. "Ask my dad for $480,000 just like that?" "It's just, after his help, the house would be secure for us, for our future," Andrew pleaded, desperation clear in his voice. Doris's sobbing intensified, casting me in the reluctant role of the villain in this unfolding drama. "Please, Charlotte, it's our home. We've spent decades in this house," she implored through tears. I was furious, yet the emotional pressure gradually wore me down. "I'll think about it," I finally muttered, feeling cornered. The next day, I hesitantly called my dad, laying out the situation. To my surprise, he agreed to help, but on strict terms. I'll give the money, Charlotte, but only with a formal agreement, a receipt. I want everything documented. When I relayed his condition to Andrew, he was visibly upset. Why does it have to be so formal? Can't he just trust us? It's $480,000, Andrew. It's a lot of money and he's just being cautious, I argued, sensing a growing rift between us. He'll get his paperwork, Andrew muttered, annoyed. The paperwork was drawn up and the money was transferred. Doris and Tyler were relieved, constantly thanking me. But the atmosphere between Andrew and me had shifted. There was a coldness that hadn't been there before. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more strained, tragedy struck. Charlotte, it's your Aunt Lisa. Her voice, shaky and choked, came through the phone. Your dad, he had a heart attack. It's bad. My heart sank. What? How is he? He didn't make it, honey. I'm so sorry. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. No, that can't be right, I mumbled, numb. I hung up and turned to find Andrew in the doorway. What's wrong? He asked, his voice low. My dad, he's gone, I managed before breaking down in sobs. Andrew came over and put his arm around me, but his embrace felt hollow, like that of a stranger. I'm sorry, Charlotte, he said, sounding sincere, but I was too engulfed in grief to truly absorb his words. After another exhausting day of funeral planning, I came home earlier than usual. The house should have been quiet, but as I inserted my key into the front door, I heard voices from the living room. It was Andrew, his tone dripping with frustration and disgust, talking to his parents. I can't do this anymore. Living with her is driving me nuts. She's just, it's too much, Andrew complained. His mother, usually so sweet and understanding, replied in a stern whisper, You have to hold on a bit longer, Andrew. We need to figure out what to do with those receipts. Your father-in-law had them. Charlotte has them now. The sooner I get out, the better. I'll grab those receipts and destroy them, and then I'll start all over again with that rich beauty I told you about. Andrew's voice was cold, calculated. A chill ran down my spine. Here I was, mourning my father, while the people I lived with plotted behind my back. They weren't the loving family I thought I had married into. They saw me as nothing more than a means to secure their financial troubles. Rage mixed with shock, but I knew I had to keep my composure. I slammed the door loudly as if I had just come in, disrupting their scheming. Oh, Charlotte, you're back early. How did everything go with the funeral plans? Doris's voice shifted instantly to one of concern, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. I forced a smile, my stomach turning. It's all coming together. Thanks for asking, I replied, while internally my skin crawled, knowing their true intentions. I realized that revealing my shock or anger at that moment wouldn't be wise. I needed to be strategic, to protect myself and perhaps even seek justice for their betrayal. The funeral was a somber event filled with heavy air, quiet condolences, and the mournful murmur of those who came to pay their respects. But as the ceremony concluded and we returned to the house I once thought of as a family home, the true nature of the people I had married into began to emerge starkly. As we sat in the living room, sipping lukewarm coffee, Andrew's demeanor changed drastically. The charming facade he always presented crumbled, revealing a colder, more calculating side. With a harsh laugh, he looked straight at me. Charlotte, pack your things. You need to get out. I've got someone else now. Someone better, he declared coldly. His words were meant to wound, but I feigned shock while internally bracing for what was to come. Before I could utter a response, Doris chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. We've had enough of you, dear. We only put up with you for your money. What about the house? I asked, feigning innocence. The house that I paid to fix? The $480,000 I poured into it? Doris's laughter pealed out, thinking my question was ludicrous. Oh, sweetie, this house is ours. You're nothing here. Andrew's smirk widened. And those receipts you're so proud of? Found them in your dad's house and burned them. They're gone. For a moment, I let them savor their perceived victory, but then, unable to contain myself, I burst into laughter. My reaction confused them, their smug smiles faltering. "Why are you laughing? What's so funny?" Andrew demanded, irritation coloring his tone. Wiping a tear from my eye, still chuckling, I revealed my hand. "You three are just pathetic. You think you're so clever. The receipts you destroyed, they were copies. The real ones are safe with my lawyer." The color drained from their faces as Andrew's arrogance turned to panic. "You can't prove anything," he stammered. "I can and I will," I shot back, my voice steady and firm. "Now I want my money back, all of it, or my next call is to the police." Tyler and Andrew exchanged glances, their earlier confidence replaced by fear. Tyler, usually so bold and brash, began to plead. "Charlotte, please, let's talk about this. We can sort something out." With the truth now out in the open and the leverage firmly in my hands, negotiations with Andrew and his parents were drawn out and tense. They tried every possible angle to sway the terms in their favor, but I stood firm. "Look, it's simple," I stated during one of our many discussions at the kitchen table of the now legally mine house. "The house gets transferred to my name in exchange for dropping the charges. That's the deal. No more games." Eventually, they relented. We all agreed that the best course of action was to make everything official and legal. I insisted on having everything documented by a lawyer and confirmed with proper papers. "I want no corners cut," I emphasized in the lawyer's office. The atmosphere was tense as documents were signed and notarized. I watched closely as each signature was applied, ensuring there was no room for further deceit. Once everything was finalized, I collected the documents related to the transfer. "I'll be keeping these in a safe place," I said to Andrew's mother, who looked deflated but still carried a hint of her former poise. I slipped the papers into a folder, ensuring they were secure. With the legalities handled, the divorce proceedings were straightforward. Andrew was quiet. His earlier arrogance evaporated. When the final papers were signed, I felt a significant weight lift from my shoulders. A chapter closed. On the day they moved out, I stood on the porch of my now fully owned house, watching Andrew, his mom, and Dad slowly carry their belongings to a rental van. Their movements were slow, the mood somber, a stark contrast to the family I thought I knew. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness as I reflected on the end of my marriage. This was far from the fairy tale conclusion I had once envisioned, but given everything that had transpired, it was undoubtedly the best outcome possible. After the dust had settled and I began to relish in my newfound peace, snippets of Andrew's life post-divorce reached me through mutual friends. Apparently, life wasn't so rosy for him after all. His new partner had left him shortly after our split, and his parents were now squeezed into a cramped apartment, a sharp descent from the comfortable home they once enjoyed. It seemed that karma had caught up with them much faster than I had anticipated. Despite their predicaments, they started reaching out, bombarding me with calls and messages, likely hoping to worm their way back into my life, or at least regain access to my house. But I had no intention of falling for their deceit again. I blocked their numbers without hesitation and blacklisted them on all social media platforms. It felt empowering to sever the final ties that bound us. One serene afternoon, as I was lost in a book in my living room, a knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. Peering through the peephole, I saw Andrew, a pitiful sight with a bouquet in hand. The audacity of his gesture made me scoff. Opening the door, I couldn't restrain a laugh at the desperation in his eyes. "Really, Andrew? Flowers?" I quipped as he shifted uneasily, the flowers seeming to droop along with his spirits. "Charlotte, I've realized so many things. I was wrong, terribly wrong," he stammered. "Remember when you told me I disgusted you?" I interrupted, leaning against the door frame, not bothering to mask my amusement at his discomfort. "What changed, Andrew? Run out of options?" His gaze dropped, the shame etched deeply on his face. "I made mistakes, but I'm here to make things right," he pleaded. I shook my head, the edges of pity barely touching my resolve. "You're not here to make things right, Andrew. You're just desperate to return to your comfortable life. But guess what? That life doesn't exist anymore. Not for you." His expression fell, and he took a step back as if my words were physical blows. "Charlotte, please save it." I cut him off sharply. "I want you to leave. Don't come back here. We're done, forever." Andrew lingered for a moment, his hopes visibly crumbling, then turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched in defeat. Returning to my book, I smiled to myself, the quiet of the house enveloping me like a comforting blanket, a stark contrast to the chaos that once reigned here. I was finally at peace, living life on my terms, and no bouquet or sweet talk could disrupt that. I was truly, finally free.